I'm glad you're here to listen to wonderful program coming to you. And please don't forget to subscribe or give us thumbs up. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, welcome to KJTV, and we have Professor Otiso. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, it has been a long time. Well, to give a brief introduction, Professor Otiso is Professor of Geography at the University of Green Bowling in Ohio, and the Director of Global Village Learning Community and the Graduate Coordinator of the School of Art, Environment, and Society. Otiso has done also extensive research on urban and economic issues as it related to African countries. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to make a minor change. I'm at Bowling Green State University, and I've stepped down from being graduate coordinator. But it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you have been there before.
Yeah, I've been there.
Okay. So why did you move to another department, or what did you do?
No, I didn't move to another department. No, it's the same university, but sometimes you want to give other people a chance to do the same thing.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm in the same department. I just stepped down from being graduate coordinator.
Yeah,
and moving on to other things.
So I know this is your area. You are a professor of geography, and you have dealt much about research on this, and we are having these issues in Kenya right now with the flooding. What can you tell us really about this flooding? Because I know it's not a new phenomenon, but it looks like it's becoming more rampant now.
Yeah, it is a little bit unusual. The main issue is you have the El Nino phenomenon on the western side of the Indian Ocean, which basically means the Indian Ocean is warmer than usual near the Kenya coast. You can talk of the whole East African region. It's warmer than usual. When that happens, the atmosphere ends up having unusually high amounts of rainfall. I mean, moisture in the atmosphere because of the warm ocean, and then therefore you end up having more of that moisture being released in terms of rain. So that is actually what is a little bit unusual. You have even seen this cyclone Hidaya that also formed recently. Cyclones are very rare in that part of that part of the Indian Ocean. But actually, in the last you can say last decade or so, we have started to see the frequency of cyclones increasing, mostly climate change. But the way they form, though, means that they are not able to hit Kenya directly because they don't form within about 300 miles of the equator. So Kenya is not at risk of being directly hit. Even the one that you saw the other day ended up hitting south of Dar es Salaam, so which puts it about 300 miles away from the equator. But even though they don't hit the equatorial region, especially where Kenya is directly, you can still end up having a lot of rainfall coming from those types of cyclones. They carry a lot of moisture, especially when they encounter a warm ocean. By the way, what powers them is actually a warm ocean. Cyclones in East Africa, by the way, is what we call hurricanes in North America. And they are powered by the same thing, warm water, releasing a lot of moisture into the atmosphere. And therefore, as that moisture is cooling down, it ends up creating a lot of rain. And that's actually why you see them dying as soon as they get into land, because they need moisture from the oceans to be able to power themselves. But as soon as they get on land, they basically die out. So there are two other very quick reasons I wanted to touch on. Before this year, we ended up having quite a bit of drought in Kenya in particular. So the soil became hardened. Therefore, when it's raining heavily, the soil is not as good at absorbing the moisture because it's already been hardened. It's called a pancaking effect. So it's too hard to swallow the moisture, the rain, so to speak. So that is across the country in general. But in urban areas, as you know, we have a lot of concrete surfaces like parking lots. As Nairobi has grown, for example, the amount of concrete surfaces has increased exponentially, which therefore means areas that would have been absorbing water cannot do it anymore, because now the water is being forced to run on top because it doesn't seep through concrete easily. And unfortunately for us, we have neglected our drainage systems for a very long time. Nairobi has been doing that for a very long time. It's not very well managed as a city. And by the way, Nairobi was not supposed to be where it is. Actually, when it was located there at the beginning in the early 1900s, people knew that it was not a good location for a city because it's not well drained. There were actually even attempts to move the city to a better drained area, but the railway company was not willing to relocate it because the city was created when the railway engineers found it to be flat and suitable for railway purposes.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, the city began to form around the initial railway depot. It should have actually been moved, but it was never moved. And actually, even recently, I saw somebody writing an article. I don't remember in which newspaper, complaining that if Winston Churchill had been more, decisive, the city would have been moved to a place that is more better drained. But it's too late now. We are stuck with what we have. But obviously, we can blame Winston Churchill all we want, but it does not take away from the fact that we ourselves have mismanaged a lot of aspects of the city. Poor drainage, we build them, then we don't manage them, then we are surprised when it rains. I mean, we build roads, we don't put in proper drainage systems. I mean, we can't blame other people. Or at some point, we have to take responsibility.
Yeah, actually, I think I came across that article. Somebody had written about it. That's the article where James Sada, the commissioner for protectorate, had told Winston Churchill that this place is not good for that. It's. But the colonial time, maybe we can give them the benefit of doubt. But is there anything they could have done? Of course, it's a swampy area.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they would have put in better drainage systems, and they did what they did. But you see, part of the problem with the colonial government, it was not in Kenya to build Kenya, it was in Kenya to make money. So they actually ended up minimizing investments in things like, housing for Africans in particular, and even things like education were left to missionary organizations. So, colonialism is a business. And you try to minimize costs and, basically make as much money as possible.
And that is true.
Yeah.
More especially in Kenya. Kenya wasn't even a colony first. Actually, it was the people who the settlers who came there were farmers, capitalists who wanted to make a quick kill and go back.
Exactly.
Yeah. So their motive was, so Nairobi became a city by accident, equally as many cities came.
Yeah, and by the way, even in the US, we have a lot of accidental cities. We have a lot of planned cities, and we have a lot of unplanned cities. And even in Gusii, you have seen you can actually start a shop in a part of Gusii next to a road. The next thing you know, there are 2 shops. The next thing you know, there are 3 shops. Nobody planned to have a town.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you have a town. And most of the time when that happens, such places don't have facilities like good drainage. But the truth is, we have not done ourselves any favors by not maintaining even the drainage systems that are there.
Yeah, and now particularly that you have talked about Nairobi. Now that Nairobi was located by accident in an area, even if they could have moved to the city, still, many business that time, they wanted to be closer to the railway for transportation of goods. So that's how it came about. But then, what have they done now about urban planning? Have we done something about the drainage? Because even if the place is bad,
the truth is there's no place you can go where it's perfect. You have to build the infrastructure, you have to plan the city, and Nairobi has not been planned for a very long time. Actually, about the only urban plan that was implemented for Nairobi is one from the colonial era, somewhere around 1948. I may have the date wrong, but it was the only one that was ever implemented. All the others were planned and never implemented. 1974 plan.
Okay.
And more recently, there was the Nairobi New Plan that was put in place, I believe, under Kibaki's administration. It was supposed to go from the general plan to what we call spatial plans, really, which now lay out in every part of the city how the city should look, how the city should be developed. Those spatial plans were never developed. As we sit right here, people have been trying to tell the governor Sakaja to actually implement those spatial plans. He has not done so. So Nairobi, as we sit here, is an unplanned city, growing exponentially. And by the way, I need to mention that I went to a recent conference, and actually somebody presented a paper on that very topic. And what they argued is that there are people in Nairobi who will lose big time if the city is planned. So these are the people that have actually ended up prevailing. And so they don't like the city to be planned because they gain from the informality and the chaos. It really benefits certain segments of society. And therefore, unless the everyday citizens who are inconvenienced by poor planning of the city actually rise up and force the government to actually do what it's supposed to do, the city will continue to be poorly managed, poorly planned, and fairly inconvenient to be able to live in.
So, if that, who are those benefiting? Just how it is in the road. Even if you are driving, whoever wants to protect that the city should not be planned, it's not safe from the floods.
Well, the problem is when people are selfish, they think that if the city is not planned, the effects will go to Josh, they will not come to me. That is the nature of selfishness. So you think that you're always thinking about yourself, you don't actually think about the bigger whole. But there are commercial interests that gain from that. And in fact, if you've been to Kilimani recently, I've been to Kilimani about a month or two ago, you have seen that the old low-rise buildings are being replaced by high-rises.
Yeah.
And one of the things that surprised me is that actually people are building beacon to beacon. The plans say you're supposed to leave a little bit of land around the building if it's a high-rise, so that you have a play area, you have a parking area, and things like that. So as we sit here, Josh, people are building beacon to beacon. So you get to a point where the space between one building and the next is actually less than, and it's almost less than arm's length. You can actually reach from one building to the other. I mean, that is horrible. It's not supposed to happen. So these buildings that we're building that are high rises, that are unplanned, that people get approved for one thing, but they end up building something entirely different for selfish reasons, are actually affecting the quality of life. I mean, if you live in that kind of apartment, you can't even see the sun. You have young kids that are growing up in these types of environments. I mean, what are we doing to ourselves? At some point, we just have to be serious enough as a country to actually take responsibility. We can't keep blaming other people for failing to implement common sense things. Like, for example, you cannot just build from beacon to beacon. You need to leave a little bit of space. I mean, even think of the people you are selling this building to. What quality of life are they going to live? Yes, you're going to make your money because you build 900 flats in a space that actually should accommodate maybe half of that. You made your money and moved away, but you have left other people living in very miserable conditions. I mean,
That's also like I have seen people drain swamps to build in a swamp area, which means we do not even have a policy of protecting swamplands, because those will be the one now absorbing this extra water of rain.
And by the way, that particular problem is not just in Nairobi, it's countrywide. I mean, you can look at the Gusii Highlands. We used to have a lot of, wetlands, as we call them, swampy areas. All of them have been drained to be used for farming. And now you have seen rivers in very well-watered areas, even like the Gusii Highlands, for example, are drying up, And then in the urban areas, now you have nowhere for this water to go. And then we get surprised when it shows up in our houses. Because we haven't provided for it.
So really, what would you recommend to Nairobi? What should they do?
Nairobi, what can be done is not a mystery. We have actually known for a long time. We have known the importance of proper planning. We have known the importance of maintaining drainage channels. We have known the importance of not building very close to the river. There are areas that we know flood, and yet we allow people to settle there. It's not a mystery. What is lacking in Nairobi is lack of political will to actually do what needs to be done in the city. And the citizens for too long have also been kind of stepping back instead of pressuring the government to actually do what it needs to do, and allowing private interests basically to go too far in terms of building in areas that they shouldn't build. I mean, remember, part of the challenge has been that Nairobi was a place where you went to make money and go back home. That was pretty much the problem from the beginning.
People never wanted to live in Nairobi.
It was almost like you were there temporarily. And the colonial government, for example, did not even provide for housing for Black residents until very late in the colonial period. In fact, you needed permission to get into Nairobi, So consequently, you ended up having a city where people, where the local population in particular, culturally came to believe was not a place for them. Now, things have changed. I mean, it's almost like diaspora. Remember, most of us came here thinking we'll be here.
We wanted to go home.
We wanted to go home. And 40 years later, you are still trying to go home. So that kind of myth has also affected Nairobi, because people have always looked at it like, why are you forcing me to plan the city? Why are you trying to control how I develop the city? I'm just here temporarily and then I go home. But meanwhile, we're in a very inconvenient city.
Now, when you look at that map of Nairobi, that is a map was given showing how the floods, that is around Nairobi River, and these areas, how the houses have been affected. Because it shows a clear, and then even when you see these are the map where Kiambu, how that river overflow. And then we know we have a lot of settlements, people even who have built along the river. What other policies which can be put in place to solve that? Because after, as you say, beacon to beacon, now even when land is left for a riparian land, somebody thinks that is his land, then he extends and builds an apartment building.
And actually, sometimes if I'm a government official, I acquire the land and then I turn around and sell it and run away, and let Joash deal with the consequences. So this whole business of impunity, whether you're looking at impunity in terms of building in areas we shouldn't build, impunity in terms of acquiring set-asides like swamps, for example, public spaces, and then building on them. So there's a certain short-sightedness and a carelessness involved in managing cities in Kenya, and of a situation. And by the way, corruption has really messed us up. And remember, this is one consequence of corruption. The land may have been set aside as a wetland, but somebody thinks, that's I can just drain it and build on it, and even sell it to some people and subdivide it. Now, when the swamps come, then you end up finding people are building very expensive homes which are now underwater. In fact, even some sections of Runda, some was telling me the other day, ended up being underwater.
Runda, those big buildings are underwater.
So in a place like Runda now, you also have to ask yourself, what about the drainage systems? Were they maintained? When the houses were being built, did somebody actually make provision for water, for drainage patterns and things of that nature?
Now, I know with your experience, you have seen here. Before even they build an area to turn an area to a residential area, there is a lot of feasibility studies which are done, where the roads are going to be, where they are going to put the parks, where the drainage will go, what capacity. They draw those plans. The builders have to go according to the plans where the utilities are going to pass. Why is it so hard in Kenya to have that before any development, that you have a plan already out?
Actually, we have had some of that happening. For example, the National Environmental Management Authority is in place, NEMA. It tries to do some of those things. But as you saw the other day when we had a gas explosion somewhere in Eastlands, Nairobi, somebody went around the plans that are very well laid out, So you can have a plan that says this is not supposed to happen, but because of this culture of corruption, money changes hands, and you end up having some of these things not being done. Even the enforcers, in fact, there have been videos of people who are supposed to enforce the rules, even when it comes to building, for example, taking money and looking the other way, you know?
In Kenya now, Professor, if you go and you are appointed to be the head of NEMA.
Yeah.
Even the people in your village will tell you, there you are going to be rich.
Exactly. That's the problem.
And now you have to start finding, you go there is no free money. Then now you start getting where somebody, your officers go to the field, they tell this person you can't build there. Then he will come with a bag of money to your office that is greeting you, and then it tells you, please, can you override that?
Yeah.
And people get compromised.
And even the police themselves, you know, I've actually seen cases where the city of Nairobi was very categorical that you cannot build here, but some politician somewhere goes around all that and starts building. And when you go there, you find the national police are protecting an illegal structure rather than actually helping to bring it down. So this, I think the time has come for us as a country to ask ourselves, you know, we might argue that the government we have was not originally set up to serve the majority population, but now we own it, you know.
Yeah.
And now that we own it, we have to ask ourselves, how long are we going to keep, you know, running away from some of these problems? How long are we going to keep pointing fingers at other people? And we realize that, for example, we just have to start managing things the way they're supposed to be managed. Once you have thousands of people living together, you have to have rules in terms of, for example, how you manage waste. There's no way around it, you know. Things like diseases don't care how the city was built initially. What they care about is whether you are actually maintaining basic hygiene. Are you planning for floods? Are you having proper drainage? Are you having these small things that actually make cities work? Now, the other thing we need to mention in the case of Kenya, by the way, very quickly, Kenya is a very unequal country. I mean, the gap between the economic classes is extremely wide. You have very many people living in slum areas. In fact, the other day you saw, because of these rains, is when now the government has come through and demolished some of these slum settlements. And of course, the government came up with like 10,000 shillings for people to relocate. The question becomes, what can you do with 10,000 shillings?
Yeah.
And of course, the government is trying to build housing, but how fast can you build them? You know, so the reality is that the culture that we're built of impunity, of corruption, has actually robbed us of the ability to build a viable economy that creates opportunities for many more people. I mean, in fact, if you create good jobs, people will naturally move away from some of these areas.
Yeah, they will go to the jobs. The thing is, there are no jobs. Even if you move people from Mukuru and Jenga,
yeah,
they would want the city to live there because that's the market. Their
market. That's what they can afford. You know, that's the housing that they can afford. Even if you create a housing for 10,000 a month, that actually excludes a lot of people in Kenya currently. So we also need to look at economic inclusiveness of our country, and which means then dealing. By the way, there are a number of things we failed to do, which are now coming back to bite us hard. Number one, when we were a young country, when the British were leaving, we had an opportunity to do effective land reform, which we never did, which a number of Asian countries did. So because we never did land reform, it actually undermined our ability to industrialize in the 1970s. And because we never industrialized in the 1970s, now you are looking at an economy that is producing a lot of poverty. You have a lot of rural-urban migration, but this rural-urban migration amounts pretty much to the transfer of poverty from rural areas to urban areas, which is why you see a lot of these slum areas. So it's a very complicated issue. And in some ways, actually, flooding is revealing the problems that we have been ignoring for years in terms of building an inclusive economy. And of course, then it compounds issues like lack of planning in the city, because now you end up realizing that, hey, we did not even prepare for things like flooding by having proper drainage. We know where the city is. The city is in a clay area. Most of the city is in a clay area that is actually likely to, end up, having floods. But we're acting surprised. And by the way, this is not the first time Nairobi has flooded. Nairobi has flooded almost every rainy season in April, and every time it's like, oh, now we're gonna plan. We're gonna
plan. They don't plan.
As soon as the rain subsides, they forget.
Now that you have brought that issue, and I wanted us to talk about what there's a tragedy which touched me and touched so many people in the Ruiru village.
Yeah.
This is an area when you see on that map.
Yeah.
It started on the higher mountain.
Yeah.
It's an escarpment on the Kinare forest. There was an old Kichabe dam.
Yeah.
And then that is where the yellow line is where the flood came, the water came, which had accumulated on a dam because of a broken railway tunnel.
Yeah.
This is the railway tunnel, which even people go there to see as a tourist. It used to be a tunnel for an old railway.
Yeah.
But now, when this flooded, the water made a reservoir.
Mm-hmm.
But when the rain pumped and then that water came down at night by force down, it came with a lot of force and actually devastated so many people, so many houses, and many people were swept in the middle of the night. Even vehicles, you can see they were driving over.
Mm-hmm.
What could have prevented that from happening?
No,
that situation.
I mean, to me, that is an example of negligence, because what happened is you had an old railway drainage that was not maintained. So to me, even the railway corporation itself needs to be asked some tough questions in terms of how is it maintaining its own infrastructure. I think the overall culture in Kenya generally is that we build things, but we don't maintain them. So there's nothing wrong with the tunnel. It's just that it got blocked, and then it created a reservoir behind it, and which at some point overwhelmed the drainage, the blockage, and then of course it came down. By the way, if you know that area, because that's my Mahiu area. By the way, I've been there, and that's like the flash floods you get in the deserts of Arizona. Semi-desert areas are very, and that's also a very good example of a soil that is not very good at absorbing the moisture, because underneath the surface is basically hardened almost to the level of concrete. So what you have is a top layer of soil that can only take so much water before it becomes a mud river that is flooding, that is flowing down here. That actually almost happened to me once when it rained in the mountains, and people will tell you when you see rain in the Abadeas, be prepared to run across some very unusual floods in the Mai Mahiu area. And I remember once actually all of a sudden driving, from Narok to Nairobi, I started seeing water showing up out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere,
It was very dusty, and then all of a sudden I see a mud river emerging from some of the bushes. I basically had to follow the thing and escape. And then I ended up stopping on top of the escarpment, and I could actually see. In fact, I have a picture. If I'd remembered, I would have looked for it. You would actually see how the river is making its way. So remember, down near my Mahiu is very dry, and yet here you are almost being drowned by a mud river. From
mud river which is coming from higher on the mountain, and you know that place is very steep. So the force which came with that water was very
and the speed with which the river comes, these are mud flows. Mud flows are very, very dangerous. People think they don't go fast. No, if you have a steep gradient like we have in that region, it can surprise you. It moves extremely fast.
And it came at night. So
once again, what you're looking at is what warnings do we have in place, for example?
Exactly.
When people settle in some of those areas, are we actually even warn them that, hey, this place can actually end up is prone to mudslides,
Exactly.
It's likely to have all these unexpected mud flows. If you see rain in the Aberdare Mountains, be careful, because you might actually end up being surprised.
Even the forest service officers, I think they saw this water build on this dam. It was not a one-day thing. It built for a long time.
Yeah.
Nobody even thought about warning people that this can turn out to be a disaster.
Yeah, I think that's the whole environmental awareness that we need to increase as a country. I mean, we are very good at saying, "Oh, the government should do." The government should. No, the government cannot do everything. So I think there's a level of civic education that needs to happen in the country, educating people in terms of the dangers of some of these things when we are cutting trees and the Aberdare Mountains, the Mao Forest, for example. Now remember, people are cutting because of economic desperation.
Yeah.
That's why people are settling in some of these areas. Now, the cheap solution is to say, oh, nobody should settle there. But the question becomes, if they don't settle there, where do they go?
Where do they go?
So these are the larger economic discussions we need to have as a country. And then in addition to that, now we deal with the practical things of educating people that when you live here, these are the expected challenges. Now, anywhere in the US, you can get a flood map, and it will tell you here you are in an area that has a 25-year flood, 10-year flood, 100-year flood. When you are buying a house here, these are the challenges you should expect.
Yeah.
Now, even here, the reality is that every citizen is not informed, but at least the government has done what needs to be done in terms of mapping these areas, making this information available. At the very least, you need to have that. Now, if it's my hope is that, for example, the Mai Mahiu situation, somebody will at least try to sue the railway corporation. Because then what this is going to start to do is to force these corporations, because enforcing the law, whether it's somebody actually coming and telling you need to do this, or it's actually through the courts, and having substantial fines might actually start the process of forcing some of these things to happen. I mean, if people drown in Nairobi because of a broken drainage system, maybe a caravan that actually got blocked, somebody should try and sue the city of Nairobi County and actually see if they can recover money, because you have to increase the pain of not doing things that are supposed to be done. And then, of course, on the citizen side, we also have to be aware that the government is not really there to take primary responsibility for you. I mean, there are some things that are simply you yourself, you need to take caution. When you are building your own house, what provision have you made for flooding? Have you actually put in place proper drainage? Are you maintaining the things that actually you put in place? Because it's easy to keep saying government should do this, government. Well, government cannot be everywhere. And by the way, government is you. It's your taxes at work. And of course, you also need to be proactive in making sure that the taxes are used for what you think they should be used for. So there's a whole lot of things that need to be done at the same time.
Yeah.
And sometimes
it all boils, as you say, political willingness.
Yeah.
If there's no political goodwill to change, because some of them are benefiting from that chaos.
Exactly.
And that's where, even now you wonder how people can be evicted who have built homes that now they have found a title of the owner.
Yeah.
And the same land officers are the one who created that situation and give you a fake title. They make their money and move.
They make their money and go away by the time you discover.
And then they are not responsible for it.
Yeah. So that's the thing. People are not being held responsible.
I was listening to a Senate committee meeting, and they are recommending that they are trying to recommend that a professional if he's an accountant, and then the money is embezzled like in the county, and he's the one who signed, he should be held responsible, even reported to the professional body, because many officers in Kenya go free, like the land people who work in lands.
They mess up the titles. They mess up the titles and then they go scot-free. So now you see the enforcement that needs to happen. And the other thing, by the way, in terms of fairness to politicians, you get the kind of leaders you deserve. When you said you vote for 50 shillings, well, then what do you expect? You're not getting the most competent person. You are getting the person that money can buy. Not necessarily the most competent. Now you can say, oh, poverty is the one that makes me do this. No, people have been educated sometimes. Actually, people have been educated in some areas. Hey, be aware that somebody who is actually giving you 50 shillings is essentially buying your vote. And when they have bought you, then you lose the power to hold them accountable. What will allow you to hold somebody accountable is if you give me a vote without me paying you.
Yeah.
Then now you have power to hold me accountable. But you cannot be accepting 50 shilling bribes and then you turn around and you are acting surprised when this guy doesn't do what, and you worry about the corruption that they engaged. Because remember, ask yourself, where did they get 50 shillings to give thousands of people to eventually win an election? When they go in, they are using that time to recover the money that they use.
Yeah, those are some of the things they do.
Yes. So in short, going back to what we're supposed to talk about, the reality is that the floods, some of them are natural events, but there's also a lot of human factors behind them. And rivers are doing what rivers are supposed to do when it rains, and we shouldn't act surprised.
Yeah, he's a human. Okay, Thank you very much. But I saw that you had a keen interest. You went and did a research in Lake Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
What can you say about it? What were your findings on harmful algal bloom?
Yeah, that's actually another interesting topic, and which is occupying me, but it's also kind of frustrating to deal with. First of all, then as I address that one, let me mention that actually this year is the first time Lake Victoria has overflowed. The last time it did was like in 2020 or earlier than that. Then it was in the 1960s. What you're beginning to see is an increasing frequency of these flood incidents across the country. Part of it is because the rivers are silting up, because we are now cultivating and we are doing agriculture in areas that we're not supposed to do agriculture. Therefore, you have a lot of erosion happening. Therefore, this soil that is being eroded from, let's say, the Gusii Islands ends up in the rivers, then eventually ends up in Lake Victoria. And then when you have a rain situation like the one we're having, even the lake is actually flooding. Now, the connection to what you're asking is algal blooms are, like microscopic plants, because they are, when you see them in water, it's also green. It's almost like the old water hyacinth problem. The difference was that the water hyacinth is a big leaf you can actually see. The algal blooms are basically microscopic plants. So what we're beginning to see is here in Lake Erie, near my university, we have a water quality center that has been trying to manage water quality in Lake Erie. They also have a problem of algal blooms, and what causes algal blooms is basically too much fertilizer, too much nutrients in the water. The two components we worry about the most is nitrogen and phosphorus, which is basically what we use on the farms.
On the fertilizer.
Yeah, so it's basically the farm fertilizer. And the excessive use of those fertilizers then ends up making its way into the waterways. Then it actually enriches the waterways. The next thing you know, these microscopic plants that used to be a minor problem all of a sudden grow and become a big problem. Now, in the case of Kisumu and Lake Victoria, you also have Kisumu, which is also dumping a lot of sewage in the lake. And the sewage is not very, very well treated. So remember, human sewage also has nitrogen.
Yeah.
Because we are eating the same plants. And then in addition, people sometimes end up washing cars in these rivers, and they're using soap that has phosphorus, So that's how phosphorus ends up in the lake. And then now you end up enriching these lakes with nutrients, and therefore you end up having this big problem of algal blooms. The reason we care about algal blooms is that actually they do produce toxins. Toxins that actually can affect human health, animal health. And, sometimes the toxins will end up in the fish. Then we eat the fish. Then the next thing you know, we are being affected. Now, fortunately, the level of toxins in Lake Victoria is not at a level we should worry about. But in a place like Lake Erie, here in the Great Lakes of North America, they do now tell you that, for example, you're not supposed to eat a certain type of fish more than, let's say, once a month. Yeah. So if we are not careful and we start fixing this problem early on, we are going to get to a point where the lake becomes polluted enough that actually even people who depend on the lake would actually start having economic challenges. By the way, we already have that issue. The Kenya part of the lake is actually the one that is in big trouble because it's shallower. And Kenya has a very small portion of Lake Victoria. And unfortunately, much of what we have is shallow. And therefore, when these rivers drain into it and we dump sewage in it, what you are seeing is that the quality of the water has declined considerably. So when we were there, we have a ship that we use there for research that actually is owned by the government. We were surprised actually in some areas you draw the net and you don't catch fish at all. There are some actually dead zones in the lake because of these algal blooms. And then now you worry about the cost of actually treating water, drinking water, because when you have these algal bloom toxins in the water, it exponentially increases the cost of treating water. And now you start asking yourself, are local water plants like the ones in Kisumu, for example, able to treat the water and take out some of these toxins that actually can come about as a result of algal blooms? So it's a very big problem, by the way. As you see, the solution is actually going upriver. And let's say encouraging farmers in Gusii land, in Nandi Hills to do things differently. For example, we should stop watering cows in the rivers, because when a cow drinks water in a river, it has a tendency to leave itself in the river. And, you can say, oh, I only have one cow. The problem is you have one cow multiplied by the number of households.
All the other cows. I mean, we have to be our brother's keeper.
We have to be our brother's keeper. So, for example, the next phase of the project is actually to try and see whether we can encourage farmers to actually build watering holes. They don't have to be very far from the river, but at least they should be something like, let's say, 10 meters, if possible, from the river, so that the ground has a chance to filter these nutrients before they end up in the river.
Even,
you know,
Dr. Otiso, before you even talk about the farmers, let's take our own county, Kisi County. That's in our sewage. They only wait for this rain to open their sewage system to plow everything to the river, and then it ends our Lake Victoria.
Yeah. Now you see, once again, you are back to negligence. Yeah, you're back to negligence. You're back to things. I mean, some things, and I mean, you're not going to be able to prevent all these floods because remember there's a natural side of things, but there is a human side that actually is within our power, and we really need to deal with some of those things. So we cannot just sit by and keep throwing our hands in the air and basically assume that things will take care of themselves, when in fact it's our responsibility to take care of some of these things. So again, it is the county government. What can it do? And what can I do as a citizen? And have we informed the citizens? Have we educated the citizenry to be able to know what they need to do? And as you can see, by the way, this algal bloom is what we call a wicked problem. It is a wicked problem because no matter where you touch, it is a challenging problem. You know, for example, it takes all of us to create algal blooms in Lake Victoria. It is going to take all of us to solve the problem. It is not an easy problem, because now the question becomes, Josh, do you tell people not to use fertilizer on the farms? No, because we need to grow food. But at the same time, we need clean drinking water, which we are affecting by using fertilizer on the farms. So both of them, food and drinking water, are equally important. So it's not an either or. It is actually, we need to address both, and all of us need to be involved. And by the way, even here in the United States, that's what we're finding.
That's still the challenge, is the human
challenge. That is still the challenge. I mean, the US may be a little bit ahead in terms of dealing with it, but they have not eliminated it. In fact, the other day, the city of Toledo, which is not far from where I live, the county government there is actually starting a lawsuit against the Environmental Protection Agency to force the Environmental Protection Agency to take some measures to control algal blooms in Lake Erie, because that is where the city of Toledo gets drinking water from. So nobody should tell you that this is a Kenyan problem. But at least you do see that when it comes to algal blooms in particular, the US is taking it serious enough. In Kenya, meanwhile, what we are seeing is that the authorities have not really started to take it as seriously as they should. And even if they know the problem, the question becomes, what are they doing? You know, for example, that even Lake Nakuru, the other day we saw that they are saying you shouldn't eat fish from that lake.
Shouldn't eat. Yeah, that's what I saw actually.
Yeah. So in other words, anybody who is burying their head in the sand, thinking that these problems are going away if we don't do anything, is deceiving themselves. And by the way, these problems are easier to deal with when they are younger.
Yeah.
If you wait until they mature, they become more complicated.
It becomes expensive.
It becomes even more expensive. So ask yourself, if you lose Lake Victoria, if you lose Lake Naivasha, what happens to the livelihood? And remember, that is Lake Victoria supports about 40 million people directly.
Yeah.
You're talking of the fishermen and the people who live along the shores. So it's not like you have somewhere else to take 40 million people if you don't actually properly manage these resources.
Yeah, that's as much as it is an issue. Then to mitigate it, that we need political goodwill, also that people need to understand that these things are affecting, and that they will continue to affect the next generation.
Yeah, and so we also, that's now where you ask yourself, when are we going to get serious? Because the science has been telling us a lot of things, and unfortunately we politicize things too much, and even in the US, what is going on. Oh, it's a Republican issue. Oh, it's a Democrat. No, everybody needs clean air. Everybody, and even in the US, as you are seeing, global warming is affecting us. You are seeing floods every day. You are seeing floods in Texas. You are seeing floods in California. So we can hide our heads in the sand all we want, but nature doesn't care. The reality is that humans do affect the environment, and of course, people will tell you, oh, natural factors are more important. No, it's not for natural factors alone. We are not running away from natural factors of some of these flooding incidents. But what we're also saying, it's very clear that in fact humans also have a role to play.
Yeah, but you see people like in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
They build the city on the sea. They just the sea.
Yeah.
But you see, they are put mitigating factors. They are built so many tunnels. Where the water will go. Even they have food security. You know, I was in Netherlands and they were saying that they have stored food in case the sea changes and then floods the whole of Netherlands, which can feed the people of Netherlands for 5 years before they will like the food.
You see, that's a case where people respect nature, and they are not burying their heads in the sand and pretending that these issues don't exist. So in our case, we have reached a level where I think the level of negligence is just unimaginable. And by the way, I also need to address the issue that comes up and these things all the time. Oh, we need to pray, and there's nothing wrong. I mean, we need to pray, but prayer is really to give us marching orders to do things.
Yeah, give us knowledge how to do things.
Not so you can throw up your hands and you know, even when you are dealing with God, it's a partnership. It's not God going to do things you're supposed to do. God is not going to sweep your house, Josh. No matter, you can pray all you want, but it's your responsibility to sweep your house. Yeah,
that's true.
You don't get it. You don't let it become dirty, and then you get sick out of it, and then you are still praying. No, some things are actually in your power, and you know, people think when you talk like that, you are not respecting God. No, God's place is very secure.
That's true.
It is very important, though, to know that this is a partnership. You know? It's a partnership. God will do what God needs to do when without fail. The problem is on the human side, we don't really take responsibility and do what we're supposed to do.
Well, we have come to the end of our time. It was nice talking to you, Dr. Otiso. I don't know if you have any other parting words you want to say before we finish.
I think my last sentence was the closing shot, that we have, it's our responsibility to do certain things and we have to do them.
Okay.
Otherwise the floods will continue reminding us that we have failed.
They will, and they will be there. They were there before we came, and they will continue to be here.
Yes, they will.
Thank you very much.